the way that it's reported, even the natural disasters that occur on a day-to-day basis. I mean, people are losing their homes in Tornado Alley at a more regular rate, I guess, because there's more tornadoes, or the hurricanes are, hitting regions like I spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico, as our viewers know, that have been prepared for hurricanes for 100 years, are obviously being affected more. So, but the news coverage, it's like also not connecting the dots. It's like, oh, there was a really bad storm. By the way, this is climate change now, and unless we do something, it's just going to happen again, or worse, and it's going to come to your backyard. Or in red states where it is affecting them, they don't realize that that is climate change. It's not some sort of like whatever cyclical climate thing that Fox News claims it is.
Absolutely. And what you're talking about, the omission of climate from these, natural disaster stories, is a huge, huge problem. And I mean, honestly, media crime. It's not just Fox News. It's every broadcast cable channel. Broad TV is by far the worst. Every type of media should be reporting on this much more, but TV virtually doesn't. So yeah, that is absolutely a huge factor. The failure of media coverage. I mean, again, climate should be getting coronavirus style coverage, but the minimum, like the bare minimum is just to include it in stories that you're already writing where it's totally relevant. This is what Genevieve Gunther does at End Climate Silence. She's a literature professor who on Twitter is just calling out and constantly, and also helping, but media to do just this. And it's so important. And she's had a big impact, but I mean, it's like such a huge problem that got to keep going.
So in terms of the work that you guys are doing organizationally and educating folks and mobilizing them, can you explain some of the efforts you guys are doing and how people can get more engaged? Like, how can someone, just an everyday citizen, take part in dispelling the myths and communicating climate, the emergency?
Yeah, great. So a couple of things. First, as you mentioned, I really go into depth in this in terms of my recent book, which you mentioned, Facing the Climate Emergency, How to Transform Yourself with Climate Truth. In fact, there's a chapter, the final chapter, devoted to this question because it's actually really complicated, right? What should one individual do in order to protect humanity and the living world it's as complex and personal as a career choice. So there's no one answer, but we can and have to think about where what we bring meets what the movement needs. So, what most people do, and is a great thing to do, is community organizing. But there's also, if you have special skills, right? If you're a graphic designer, you can volunteer as a graphic designer for a climate emergency organization. If you're a bookkeeper or a lawyer or whatever, fundraiser, if you're willing to do the job no one wants.
Yes, exactly.
So there's so many things, so many ways. So the first thing to do, the one thing that every single person should do, is talk about it. Talk about the climate emergency with your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues. Just talk about it whenever it's relevant. And it's relevant in most conversations, actually. So
I'm sorry, just for on that note, how do you talk about it? How do you talk about it with someone that may not, maybe they do listen to Rush Limbaugh and Fox News all day long, but they're they live in Florida or Texas facing drought. Maybe they're whatever it is, everybody's facing this, but how do you communicate it with climate deniers or skeptics?
So it's a good question, but you don't need to start there. right? Have an easy one. I mean, it's still challenging, but talk to the Democrats in your life that, that are activists or progressives or that aren't or whatever. And I mean, share your personal experience of this. Talk about how you feel. Don't give a PowerPoint about climate science. That's not this while scientists brought this issue to our attention, that does not mean that we can't relate to it in human terms. So talk about what you think the future holds and what you fear and any action that you've done or are considering, and ask the other person what they feel about the climate and the future. And what's amazing when you start to initiate these conversations, I mean, it's really sad, but I hear people say all the time, oh my gosh, no one ever asked me how I feel about the climate emergency. And it's like, this is apocalyptic. I mean, and nobody has considered that it might be painful or scary or like we need to go there. So talking, those kinds of conversations are a kind of organizing or activism that we can do during this quarantine, whatever, lockdown period. And then the second thing that people should do is find their way into and in the climate emergency movement. So groups like the Climate Mobilization, and I'll talk about our work, but yes, Sunrise, Extinction Rebellion, the School Strikers, or the Climate Mobilization, and our allies are the key organizing strategy we've been working on for the past year and a half are these climate emergency declarations and local campaigning. So over 1,500 governments now globally have declared a climate emergency and implemented various levels of follow-on measures. Nobody, I mean, with some exciting results, nobody I can point to and say, like, yes, they're doing enough because there's so incredibly much to do. But like Ann Arbor, Michigan, for example, declared a climate emergency and then presented a $1 billion plan to bring the city to zero emissions by 2030. So, I mean, that's, extremely ambitious for a city of that size. And a group of cities in California that declared a climate emergency then banned gas hookups in new construction for heating or appliances. And that's spread to like 20 cities now. So anyway, the climate emergency movement that I'm talking about is distinct from the gradualist climate movement that's been around for decades. So join the movement that says we need emergency action now. Mm-hmm. And a transition to zero emissions as quickly as humanly possible. None of this zero emissions by 2050, 30 years from now. Join the action as quickly as humanly possible camp.
Thank you for watching The Nomiki Show. You can support us on YouTube by clicking subscribe, like, and sharing to get those alerts. And patrons, well, they make this show run on time. So thanks to all of you who have joined our community already. If you like our content and want more, from special segments to interviews and merch, you can join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. I'm spending all of my iced coffee money on other people's shows because I think this is the time that we have to support our independent media.